Young Sheldon's day started like any other. Breakfast with exactly 2 slices of toast cut diagonally, a precise 8-minute shower, and 14.2 seconds of mentally rehearsing quantum theories before heading out. But what Sheldon Cooper didn't anticipate on this seemingly average morning was that a single step into his garage would unravel a secret that had been buried deeper than his physics textbooks in a Baptist town. It began when Missy accidentally kicked over an old dusty trunk while chasing a ball. Sheldon, being Sheldon, immediately got distracted from his task of calculating atmospheric pressure changes caused by refrigerator doors. "That trunk doesn't belong here," he said, brushing off cobwebs with a towel dipped in hydrogen peroxide. Missy rolled her eyes. "It's just old junk, Shelley." But Sheldon's curiosity had already been activated like a neutron bomb. He opened the trunk, expecting old tools or moldy camping gear. What he found instead were letters, dozens of them, tied together with an old ribbon, yellowed by age. Each one was addressed to GJ, and written in a feminine, elegant hand. Sheldon's eyes narrowed. GJ clearly stood for George Jr., his father. But the name on the return address wasn't Mary. It was someone named Loretta Jean. He scanned the first letter. The handwriting spoke of love, distance, heartbreak, and most intriguingly, a boy named Matthew who reminds me so much of you it hurts. Sheldon blinked. Statistically speaking, this indicates an 87% probability that my father had another child before marrying Mom, he murmured. He looked up. The sky hadn't changed. Birds still chirped. But inside Sheldon's brain, tectonic plates were shifting. At dinner that night, he couldn't concentrate. George Sr. was devouring pork chops while Mary scolded Missy for putting gum under the table. "Dad," Sheldon said slowly, "did you ever know a woman named Loretta Jean?" The table went silent. George Sr. stopped chewing. Missy's eyes widened. Mary raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask that, Sheldon?" George asked, voice tight. "I found some letters. They're signed by her. They're emotional, romantic. And she mentioned a boy named Matthew, possibly your son." The fork dropped from George's hand. Mary's expression turned from confusion to disbelief. "Sheldon, where did you find those?" "In a trunk in the garage," he answered. "Which statistically proves my hypothesis about hidden family secrets. Also, you should probably consider updating the lock system." George stood up slowly, his face pale. "Those letters weren't meant to be found. Then why weren't they burned or encrypted?" Sheldon asked innocently. "I could help with that." The tension at the table was thicker than Texas chili. Mary looked at her husband, her lips quivering. "Is it true, George? Did you have another child?" "It was before I met you," George finally admitted. "I was young. Stupid. We were in love, but life pulled us apart. I never even knew for sure if the boy was mine." "So you never told me?" Mary whispered. "Not even after all these years." Sheldon stared at them both. His scientific mind demanded truth, but his young heart didn't know how to process betrayal in the family structure. Missy, always the one with the final punch, whispered. "Looks like we might have a secret brother out there." "Great. Another person smarter than you to compete with." Sheldon didn't answer. For the first time in his life, his equations couldn't solve what he was feeling inside. The variables had shifted. The constants weren't constant anymore. And as he went to bed that night, one question kept playing over and over in his mind like a broken record. Who is Matthew, and where is he now? The next morning, Sheldon was already awake before sunrise, sitting at the kitchen table with a spreadsheet. It was titled, "Possible Locations of Unknown Half-Brother Based on Linguistic, Postal, and Emotional Data in Loretta Jean's Letters." He had mapped out 17 states, narrowed it down to 4, and triangulated a small town in Arkansas where the last letter was postmarked. "I'll need transportation, some snacks, and minimal adult supervision," Sheldon said as he presented his plan to Mima. She stared at him, sipping her coffee. "You want me to drive you across state lines to find your maybe brother? Technically, he's more like a half-sibling resulting from a potential premarital genetic contribution from my father. And yes, I've packed a travel toothbrush." Mima sighed. "You're lucky I'm bored." 2 days later, they arrived in the dusty outskirts of Helena, Arkansas. Sheldon had tracked down a high school math competition record from 1992. A boy named Matthew J. had won first place with a perfect score at the age of 11. A math prodigy? Sheldon whispered. The genetic evidence is stacking up. Mima, skeptical but curious, helped Sheldon find an address listed in a 15-year-old church directory. The house was modest, quiet, and had wind chimes that made Sheldon flinch. When the door opened, a man in his late 20s stood there, dark hair, calm eyes, and a puzzled expression. Can I help you? Yes, Sheldon said, gripping a folder. Are you Matthew? Matthew Jean. Yeah, who are you? I'm Sheldon Cooper. Statistically, I'm 92.7% certain we share paternal DNA. Mima interrupted. What the boy means is, he thinks you might be his brother. Matthew stared, blinking. Wait, are you saying George Cooper is your dad? Correct. And possibly yours too. Matthew looked stunned. My mom, Loretta Jean, she passed away years ago. She never talked much about my father, just said he made a mistake but wasn't a bad man. Mima whispered, sounds familiar. Matthew invited them in. As Sheldon explained everything, complete with charts, timelines, and even speculative Punnett squares, Matthew listened quietly. He didn't get angry. He didn't cry. He just said, so you're the genius kid from TV, huh? Local TV, Sheldon corrected. And I prefer the term gifted polymath. That night, they shared stories, about George, about childhood, about what it meant to grow up not knowing where you came from. Sheldon, for the first time, didn't talk like a robot. He listened. He felt. Do you resent him? Sheldon asked. Sometimes, Matthew replied. But then I look at what I've built, my life, my family, and I think, maybe he gave me something just by not being there. Freedom. Motivation. Sheldon said nothing. He stared at the stars, calculating orbital paths and regrets. When they returned to Texas, George Sr. was waiting. He looked older, more fragile. Did you find him? He asked. Yes, Sheldon replied. His name is Matthew. He looks like you. But he's kind. Rational. He works in aerospace engineering. George nodded slowly. I always wondered. Mary stood behind him, holding his hand. She didn't smile, but she didn't pull away either. Later that night, George went into the garage alone. He sat beside the empty trunk and cried. Not because he lost something, but because for the first time, he was forced to face what he'd left behind. Sheldon, peeking from the hallway, didn't interrupt. For all his equations, he finally understood something beyond numbers. People are messy, choices have weight, and truth doesn't always come with closure. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Matthew. Inside was a photo of him, his wife, and 2 kids. On the back it said, To Sheldon, thanks for finding me. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up.